This is the application section. In this section, we are going to use the tools and knowledge acquired from the previous sections and apply them into a step-by-step conflict resolution framework. We acknowledge that conflict is inevitable in the workplace and that conflict has a destructive nature. The aim is to replace all the negativity surrounding conflict with a constructive or a positive outcome. This constructive outcome is anything between reaching a win-win agreement all the way to no agreement but improved relationships. And how we are going to do that? Confrontation is the key. But before we jump into confrontation, we need to do our homework first. When a conflict exists, it is better to decide whether to address it. Luckily, window on behavior is a tool that guides us to the appropriate skills needed in a given situation. From this window, you notice behaviors such as verbal cues, facial expressions, and feelings of some other person. These received information can be classified as unacceptable or above the line, or unacceptable or below the line. If a behavior falls above the line in the acceptable area, then I don't need to interfere because it's someone else's problem. What I can do in this situation, I can communicate, use my communication skills and help the other party to solve his problem. On the other hand, when a behavior falls below the line, then it affects me and prevents me from reaching my goals. If I'm bothered by something and the other party seems unaffected, then I own the problem and need to confront the other party. When both parties are affected, then both own the problem and we need to engage in a problem-solving activity, such as negotiation. Next comes reflection. At this stage, you ask yourself whether this conflict is real or imaginary. Is my mood what causing the conflict? Further, is the noticed behavior what causing the conflict, or there are other actors? One must understand his own position, and you need to understand what is desired from the confrontation, what is acceptable and what is negotiable. Knowing your partner is crucial in negotiations. The best alternative to a negotiated agreement helps you in distinguishing a good deal from a bad one. You can view it as a side alternative that satisfies your needs. If current negotiations didn't surpass this alternative, it is better to walk away. It also helps in deciding whether confrontation is advantageous or is a waste of effort and time. So it's like an agreement compass. Finally, you need to invite the other party to discuss the problem. You need to explicitly frame that this meeting is to solve a problem, and the invitation and the meeting has to be in a neutral and a safe environment that promote mutual respect. Now that you've already identified your partner, you know your needs, you know your concerns, it's time to address them. You need to express your concerns in the most objective way possible by assigning them and linking them to facts. Do not leave the room for interpretation because we cannot read minds. It is also important to use the I and we statements to soften the conversation and to avoid sounding accusatory. This will help the other party to emphasize with your message and to be open for the conversation. Next, you need to explain the impact. You need to explain how this conflict affected you and how it affected others. In addition, you need to give the other party the benefit of the doubt. That is, you need to acknowledge that he didn't mean harm by this behavior. He didn't notice that this behavior affected you negatively. Next, you need to listen to the other party's concern. Now that you have expressed your point of view, it is the other party's time. Encourage him to express his concerns and to tell his side of the story by asking open-ended questions such as, how do you feel about this situation? It is important to harness the skills of active listening, that is, to listen to both content and feelings. Next, you need to frame the problem. At this point, you should be able to frame the problem as you interpret it from the discussion. A good problem statement should be able to address all the concerns of all parties involved. Always check if the framed problem is addressing the other party's concerns by asking him, is this the problem as you view it? Next, brainstorming ideas. When the problem is clear, it is easy to generate ideas. In this stage is merely brainstorming, in which you encourage idea generation by avoiding judgments. Write down each idea for the next stage. Evaluating options. At this stage, you go through each idea and check for its reliability. The aim is to arrive at a solution that both parties can live with. At this stage, you start comparing alternatives with your partner. Fine-tuning and implementation. In this stage, you check for the implication the agreement has on your life. New concerns arise at this stage due to the change brought by the agreement. Fine-tuning is to modify the decision to address your new concerns. Next, you shift into creating an implementation plan and a procedure to monitor the agreement on the long run with your partner. Mediation is a process in which a third party tries to mitigate the interaction between disputants in order to improve their interaction and hopefully reach a solution. Mediation is appropriate in intractable conflicts where interests are highly distributional, such as highly positional disputes over scarce resources or highly emotional ones. It is also appropriate when one party is stronger than the other, such as a conflict between a manager and his employee. Further, it is crucial in high-intensity conflicts, which are characterized by escalation and polarization, for example, strikes and absenteeism. When negotiations reach an impasse, mediation is one option to consider. The mediator is a trained individual that is able to separate the core aspects of the conflict from the overlays. Conflict overlays are extraneous problems that shift the attention away from the core problems, making them harder to address. For example, framing problems, which arise from a problem statement that doesn't consider the concerns of all disputants, or procedural problems, which are problems that arise from the perceived fairness of the process and how it's going to balance power. Misunderstandings arise from our worst case bias, in which we tend to over-vilify our opponents and to assume the worst case scenario and carry on negotiation with the I know it all mentality. Mediators have the communication skills necessary to facilitate the negotiation and to soften conflict overlays and hammer on the core problem. Cuckoosing is one of the most widely used techniques by mediators. In this technique, the mediator acts as a messenger between disputants and he conducts separate meetings and help each disputant to express his feelings and concerns without the fear of the other party being in the room. It is useful when disputants show hostility, antagonism, and lack of trust. Because for joint sessions to work, both parties need to be flexible about how they are going to reach their goals. Both parties must share responsibility for reaching an agreement, and they need to be willing to suggest alternatives without the fear of being weak. After we've established a conflict confrontation framework and we get a brief about mediation, the next step is to read through the scenario presented underneath the video and to get a sense of how this model works in a real situation. Thank you.